They told me family means love, but on the day the will was read, I learned it meant betrayal. My brother Daniel got everything, the house, the money, even the heirlooms promised to me. I stood there smiling through tears while my father whispered, "You'll understand one day. He deserves it." For weeks, I replayed those words, wondering if I truly was worthless. Then came the message, "We're short this month. Can you help?" That was the moment I realized the truth. They hadn't cut me out to protect him. They'd cut me out to destroy me. The candles on my birthday cake flickered in the dim light of my parents' dining room, casting warm shadows across the table. "Happy birthday, Claire," my family sang in unison, their voices weaving together in a show of unity. I smiled, grateful for the effort, but the moment I looked at the pile of gifts, my heart dropped. Half of them weren't even for me. My brother Daniel, standing proudly beside me, received the real treasures: an expensive watch from my father, a leather briefcase from my mother, and a check slipped discreetly into his pocket. My pile consisted of scented candles, scarves, and a book of inspirational quotes. The evening stretched on with laughter and toasts, but every story told circled back to Daniel. His job, his connections, his supposed brilliance. "You know, Daniel just closed another big deal," my father boasted to an uncle. "We couldn't be prouder." I sipped my wine and kept my smile fixed, though I felt the sting with every word. I wanted to believe this was just another family dinner, that I was overthinking. But then my father leaned close to Daniel and whispered, unaware I was listening, "You've always been the pride of this family. Claire knows that." I froze. My smile wavered, then returned quickly, as though I could fool myself into thinking it hadn't happened. But I heard it. I couldn't unhear it. Later that night, after everyone had left and the glow of celebration faded, I wandered into the study, searching for a quiet corner to breathe. My father's desk sat neat and orderly, every paper stacked, every pen aligned. Yet something caught my eye, an envelope protruding slightly from the back of the bottom drawer. Curiosity overcame hesitation. I pulled it free. Inside was a legal document, crisp and formal. It was a will, an older version, dated years ago. My breath caught as I read the words. "The estate shall be divided equally between Claire and Daniel." My hands shook. I read it again, just to be sure. The fairness written in black ink was undeniable. But that wasn't what the lawyer had said weeks ago. The official will read differently. Daniel would inherit everything: the house, the investments, the family heirlooms. I, the daughter who spent nights caring for my mother through her illnesses, the one who sacrificed vacations to pay off small debts when my parents forgot bills, was left with nothing. I pressed the paper to my chest, a wave of nausea flooding me. Had they changed it? When? Why? The thought that they had once believed in fairness, then deliberately erased me, cut deeper than I expected. The next morning, I confronted my mother in the kitchen. "I found an older will," I began cautiously, laying the document on the counter. "It says the estate should be shared between Daniel and me. Why was it changed?" Her eyes flicked down at the paper, then up at me, cold and sharp. She didn't even glance twice. "Claire, stop this nonsense," she said, her voice dismissive. "You're always imagining things. We never promised you anything." "But this is in black and white," I insisted, pointing at the signature. Her voice rose, sharp as glass. "Enough! Don't embarrass yourself. You've always been too sensitive. Why can't you be more like your brother? Grateful for what you have." Her words landed like blows. Gaslighting, I realized later. She wasn't just denying the truth, she was making me question whether I had a right to feel hurt at all. I swallowed hard, retreating with the paper still in my hand. Upstairs in my old bedroom, I sank to the floor, staring at the lines of ink as though they might rearrange themselves, reveal a hidden truth. But the truth was already plain. At some point, my parents had chosen Daniel over me. Not just in small ways, but in the most permanent, undeniable way possible. I sat there, remembering all the little moments that now seemed like warnings. Daniel getting the bigger bedroom because he's older. Daniel being excused from chores because boys shouldn't have to clean. Daniel's failures shrugged off, while my smallest mistakes became lectures about responsibility. I had ignored them, rationalized them, told myself all families were a little unfair. But this was betrayal written into law. I held the will tighter, my pulse racing. If I said nothing, they would continue pretending, and Daniel would inherit everything uncontested. If I pressed the issue, I risked being branded ungrateful, the difficult child who never appreciated her family. I looked in the mirror across the room, saw my own face pale and strained, and in that reflection, a thought whispered, chilling and impossible to silence. What if she's right? What if I really don't deserve anything? I shook my head, angry at myself for even entertaining it. My chest ached with the weight of invisible hands pressing down. This wasn't just about money. This was about worth, about being seen. I wanted to scream, to tear the paper apart, to run to the world and shout what they had done. But instead, I folded the document carefully and tucked it into my purse. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but I knew one thing for certain. If I ignored this, I would lose myself completely. That night, lying awake in my old bed, I thought of my father's words at the party, the whisper that cut deeper than any shout. You've always been the pride of this family. Claire knows that. Yes, I knew it. And for the first time, I wondered if knowing would finally break me. The weeks after my birthday unfolded like a carefully staged play, and I was the forgotten understudy. Every morning, I scrolled through Facebook only to find my parents posting pictures of Daniel, smiling in his suit, shaking hands at some event, holding a champagne glass at another dinner. So proud of our son, the captions read, a true example of hard work and dedication. Not once did my name appear. Not once was my career as a teacher, the years of patience and sacrifice, mentioned. I tried to ignore it at first. Social media was just an illusion, wasn't it? But then my colleagues began asking why I wasn't at Daniel's charity gala, why I wasn't in any of the family portraits they saw online. You look so close, one of them remarked, but you're never in the pictures. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't matter. Inside, though, it gnawed at me. One evening, after another long day at school, I brought it up at dinner. I don't understand why I'm never included in the posts, I said carefully. Don't you think it looks odd? Like I don't exist? My mother set her fork down and stared at me, her lips tightening. Claire, must you always find something to complain about? I'm not complaining, I insisted. I'm just saying it feels strange. You're jealous, my father cut in sharply. Daniel works harder, he achieves more. Why can't you be happy for him instead of making everything about you? The words hit me harder than I expected. I tried again, voice trembling. But Enough! My mother snapped. You sound petty. Daniel deserves recognition. Stop acting like you've been wronged. I bit down the rest of my protest. Every time I reached for understanding, they twisted it into selfishness. Every attempt at honesty became ammunition against me. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't just overlooked, I was being erased. Days blurred together until one night, a new photo appeared on my feed. It was Daniel again, smiling at a family dinner. My parents flanked him proudly, his arm around my mother's shoulders, and then I saw it, gleaming softly against the light, my grandmother's necklace. The necklace she had pressed into my hands when I was 15, whispering, "This is for you, Claire. One day, it will remind you that you're stronger than you think." I leaned closer to the screen, my stomach twisting. I hadn't seen that necklace in years. After my grandmother died, I had searched for it, desperate to hold on to something of hers, only to be told it had been misplaced. Now here it was, displayed like a trophy around Daniel's neck, as though it had always belonged to him. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling so violently I thought I might break the keys. They had taken even that from me, my grandmother's promise, my last connection to someone who truly believed in me. The next Sunday, the family gathered for brunch. Midway through, my father raised his glass. Daniel is the future of this family," he declared proudly. "Everything we have, everything we've built, belongs with him. Claire understands. She has her own life." My heart pounded as the words sank in. This wasn't a slip, wasn't an accident. It was their official declaration. My role was not daughter, not equal heir, not even part of the legacy. My role was silence. I forced myself to speak. "So that's it? I'm nothing to you? All those years I stayed home, helped Mom through surgeries, paid bills when Daniel disappeared? None of that counts?" The table went quiet. My mother's eyes narrowed and her voice came like ice. "Claire, don't embarrass yourself. You've never been the kind of child we could rely on. Daniel has always carried this family." I almost laughed at the absurdity, but no sound came. Instead, I stared at them, my throat tight, my chest burning. Daniel sat back smirking, sipping his coffee as though he had already won. That night, my phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. I hesitated, then opened it. His words glowed on the screen. "You know, I never had to try. Not once. Because you've always carried the weight. You took care of them, you cleaned up the messes, you kept things running, and I got the rewards. It's always been that way. You should accept it." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. There it was. The truth laid bare. He knew. He knew exactly what had been stolen from me, and he reveled in it. For the first time, I felt something shift deep inside. Anger, sharp and dangerous, cut through the despair. But beneath it, a darker thought whispered, one I could barely admit even to myself. Maybe they had never loved me at all. Maybe I was never meant to be part of this family. Maybe my only role was to suffer so Daniel could shine. The phone slipped from my hand, landing with a dull thud on the floor, and I sat there in the dark, alone, with a realization I could not escape. I wasn't just excluded. I was their scapegoat. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale air. I sat rigid in the front row, my hands clenched in my lap as the judge read the will aloud. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion, but each word felt like a blade carving me out of existence. "All assets, including the family estate, investments, and heirlooms, shall be passed solely to Daniel Carter." I heard the murmur ripple through the room, the faint gasps of distant relatives who hadn't expected it to be so blatant. My chest tightened, but before I could process the weight of the decision, my father rose to his feet. He didn't wait for the judge to finish. He didn't wait for decorum. "A daughter is just a passerby," he said loudly in English for the benefit of everyone present. "A daughter is only a guest in the family. The son is the future." The words struck harder than any verdict. A hush fell over the room. I felt my breath catch, my skin prickle with heat. A guest. That was what I was to him. Not a child, not family. A guest, disposable, temporary, unworthy of permanence. I tried to stand, to speak, but my voice died in my throat. My relatives looked away, some embarrassed, others complicit in their silence. Daniel adjusted his tie, smirking faintly as if he had already claimed victory. I walked out of the courtroom without waiting for the gavel to fall. My ears rang, my vision blurred. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed, cars rushing past, strangers on their phones. But for me, the world had collapsed. That evening, back in my apartment, I sat on the floor staring at the walls. I couldn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. I felt emptied, hollowed out. My phone buzzed. A message notification. It was from an unknown number. No name, just text. "Check your mother's old safe." My heart lurched. My mother's safe. Long unused, buried under boxes in the attic of the family home. She had passed away years ago, but I remembered the safe clearly. She always said it held what mattered most. When she died, my father had locked it away and told me it was empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever sent the message knew something I didn't. With trembling hands, I grabbed my keys and drove through the night, headlights carving through the darkness. The house was empty when I arrived, my parents and Daniel still celebrating their triumph somewhere else. Dust coated the hallway, but I found my way to the attic. My fingers fumbled as I dragged boxes aside until the safe came into view. The combination was one my mother had whispered to me once when I was a child afraid of secrets. Her wedding date. I dialed the numbers, my breath shallow. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found a small envelope, yellowed with age. My hands shook as I slid the letter free. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's elegant script. I unfolded the paper and read, "To my children. The estate is to be divided equally. Fairness is the foundation of love. If this will is ignored, if the truth is buried, it will destroy this family from within." The room spun. I gripped the letter, my vision swimming with tears that finally broke free. My mother had wanted equality. She had seen the danger. And yet they had buried her words, hidden them, rewritten her truth. I sank to the floor, clutching the letter to my chest. For a long time, I couldn't move. I thought of burning it, destroying the evidence, because the weight of confrontation terrified me. What if no one believed me? What if exposing it only made them hate me more? My hands hovered over the candle on the desk, the flame flickering. I could end it now, let the fire erase the burden. The thought tempted me, the promise of silence, of escape, but my fingers trembled violently, refusing to release it into the flame. Instead, I stumbled outside, the night air sharp against my skin. I walked until my legs gave out, collapsing on the edge of the lake where I had played as a child. The moon reflected across the water, fractured and trembling like the thoughts in my head. I unfolded the letter again, tracing the ink with unsteady fingers. The paper shook in my hands. My heart pounded as though the words themselves were alive, demanding to be heard. Fairness is the foundation of love. But what love? What fairness had ever been offered to me? I sat there for hours, the cool wind tangling my hair, the sound of the water lapping against the shore. Alone, with nothing but my mother's voice on paper, I felt the crushing weight of betrayal. The letter should have given me strength, but instead it broke me. It reminded me that even she had known this would happen, that my role in the family was to be diminished, erased. The world around me blurred into silence. I hugged the letter close, rocking gently, my whispers dissolving into the night. Why wasn't I enough? For the first time, I admitted to myself the possibility that I never would be. The letter from my mother never left my side. I carried it in my purse, tucked it beneath my pillow at night, sometimes even pressing it to my chest when the silence of the apartment threatened to crush me. It wasn't just paper. It was proof. Proof that my reality wasn't a hallucination, that I wasn't the ungrateful child they insisted I was. And yet, the more I read her words, the angrier I became. They hadn't simply ignored me. They had rewritten my mother's final wishes, erased her voice, twisted the truth so completely that even I doubted myself. My entire life I had been cast in a role, the scapegoat, the problem child, the one whose worth was always measured against Daniel's effortless glory. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Every dismissal, every cruel word, every time they told me I was too sensitive, they had been weaving a narrative to protect themselves, to maintain the image of a perfect family. The realization hit me like fire spreading through dry grass. I wasn't broken, I was sacrificed. Late one night, unable to sleep, I found myself searching online for answers. I typed "toxic family scapegoat" into the search bar. The results led me down a rabbit hole of articles, forums, and survivor groups. Hesitant, I joined one, using a pseudonym. Within minutes, I was reading stories that felt eerily familiar. Daughters cut out of wills. Sons turned into golden idols while their siblings bore the blame for everything. Mothers who gaslit their children into silence. Fathers who proclaimed one child worthy and another worthless. Tears streamed down my face as I scrolled. I wasn't alone. There were thousands of us, each carrying scars that looked almost identical. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the weight in my chest lift slightly. One evening, after sharing a fragment of my story, a message appeared in my inbox. "Claire, If you ever choose to tell the world, know this, you won't be alone. My pulse quickened. It wasn't just empathy, it was a call to action. I stared at the screen, rereading the words until they blurred. For years, my voice had been dismissed. But here, among strangers, it mattered. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't sit in silence anymore. If my family insisted on casting me as the villain, I would write my own story. I started small. Every time my parents spoke to me, I recorded the conversation. When they snapped, belittled me, dismissed me, I saved it. I collected screenshots of Daniel's extravagant purchases, vacations abroad, luxury cars, nights in clubs, all financed with money meant to preserve the family's legacy. Piece by piece, I built a record of truth. Then came the harder step. I bought a cheap microphone, set it on my desk, and pressed record. My voice trembled at first as I spoke into the void. My name isn't important, but I am the forgotten child. That was how the podcast began. Anonymous, raw, unpolished. I told stories from my childhood, the subtle cruelties, the outright betrayals. I read passages from my mother's letter without naming names. At first, I thought no one would listen. But within weeks, the episodes spread. People wrote in, sharing their own stories, thanking me for saying the words they couldn't. The Forgotten Child became more than a podcast. It became a community, a movement. With every episode, my voice grew steadier. I was no longer pleading for recognition from people who would never give it. I was speaking for those who had been silenced, and in the process, I found pieces of myself I thought were gone. Still, fear lingered. What if my family discovered it was me? What if Daniel retaliated? I kept my identity hidden, but the danger pressed against me like a shadow. Then one afternoon, an email arrived in my inbox. The subject line read, "Your mother would want you to know the truth." I hesitated, then opened it. The message was from a lawyer named Richard Hale. He claimed he had once worked with my mother on her estate. "She trusted me," he wrote. "I know what she wanted for you, and I can help you prove it." My heart raced as I reread the words. Was it a trap? Another manipulation? Or was this the lifeline I'd been waiting for? I closed my laptop, staring at the microphone on my desk. My story had already reached thousands, but this could expose everything. For the first time in years, the fear in my chest shifted into something sharper, brighter. Not hope exactly, but resolve. They had taken everything from me. Now, maybe, it was time to take something back. Years slipped by, and the distance I had built between myself and my family hardened into a wall they could not breach. My podcast grew beyond anything I imagined. The Forgotten Child wasn't just a voice anymore, it was a mirror held up to countless families, exposing the cracks they wanted to hide. I had become someone they could no longer erase. Meanwhile, Daniel's empire of illusions began to crumble. The photos of luxury vacations and champagne parties vanished from social media, replaced by silence. Whispers filtered through old family friends. Failed investments, unpaid loans, creditors knocking on his door. I watched from afar, not with glee, but with a strange detachment. This was the destiny my parents had chosen when they put everything in his hands. One evening, I received an email from a former neighbor. "Your parents' house is up for sale," it read. "They're downsizing? Looks like things aren't going well." I didn't answer. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but what was there to say? They had chosen Daniel as their future, and now that future was collapsing in real time. Then, one night, my phone lit up with a message from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it until I saw the words, "Claire, we need you. Please come back. We can't do this without you." The number was my father's. I stared at the message for a long time, the screen glowing in the dark. My heart should have leapt, should have softened at the plea. But instead, I felt an emptiness, a cold clarity. They hadn't reached out because they loved me. They hadn't suddenly realized my worth. They were drowning, and I was their last lifeline. I set the phone down without responding. For the first time, I understood the full weight of freedom. Days later, my inbox overflowed with messages from family acquaintances. Some were confused, Others were angry. "Why won't you help your parents? They gave everything to Daniel, and now he's in trouble. You're their daughter. You should step up." But I had already stepped up my entire life. I had been their silent caretaker, their scapegoat, their forgotten child. My duty was fulfilled long ago. Instead of answering them, I opened my podcast microphone. My voice was steady, almost calm. "They told me I wasn't part of the family. They said Daniel was the future, that I was nothing. But now, when the future has burned down, they've come knocking on my door. And my answer is simple: no. I already gave them everything when I survived them." The episode went viral overnight. Listeners flooded the comments with messages of solidarity. Some wept, some raged, others shared their own stories of being cut out, scapegoated, erased. My refusal wasn't cruelty, it was justice. But the real storm came days later, when my lawyer, Richard Hale, released a statement. With my permission, he presented my mother's letter to the court. "This document," he declared, "was written and signed by Margaret Carter. It directly contradicts the will currently in place. It states clearly that the estate must be divided equally between both children. Not doing so would, in her words, destroy the family from within." The news exploded. Reporters picked it up, blogs dissected it, commentators debated it on talk shows. The golden image of my family shattered overnight. For years, they had painted themselves as pillars of tradition, morality, and unity. Now they were exposed as frauds who had ignored a dying woman's last wish. The backlash was immediate. Old friends cut ties. The church stopped mentioning their names. The very community they had tried so hard to impress now turned its back in disgust. I watched from a distance as their carefully crafted world disintegrated. My father tried to deny the letter's authenticity, but Richard produced evidence: emails, notarized drafts, witnesses who remembered my mother's intent. The truth was undeniable. Daniel, once their pride, now stood humiliated. His debts were public knowledge, his reputation in ruins. The brother who smirked through my pain was now facing a courtroom of his own, creditors circling like vultures. I didn't need to confront them in person. My silence spoke louder than words. My absence cut deeper than any presence could. And when the community whispered, it wasn't my name they pitied anymore. It was theirs. The final twist came when Richard called me. His voice was calm, measured, but I could hear the weight in it. "Claire, the letter has legal standing. If you want, you can claim your share of the estate. Everything they tried to deny you could be yours." I sat in silence, gripping the phone, the enormity of the choice pressing against me. For years I had dreamed of justice, of proof, of reclaiming what was stolen. Now it was within my reach. And yet, another thought echoed in my mind. Do I even want it anymore? The trial that once seemed impossible became nothing more than a headline, another story swallowed by the endless churn of news. But for my family, it was the end. My father's voice no longer carried authority in the community. His words were whispered about, mocked, stripped of weight. My mother retreated into silence, no longer able to parade her perfect life across social media. And Daniel became a ghost of himself. The creditors took his cars, his house, even the watch my father had once given him as a symbol of pride. The golden boy was tarnished beyond repair. For me, though, the harvest of consequences came not in riches, but in peace. I declined to pursue my share of the estate. I didn't need the house, the money, the hollow remnants of a legacy built on lies. What I needed was already mine. The forgotten child had grown beyond me. It had become a chorus of voices, a space where people found solace in their pain, where they transformed wounds into strength. My career wasn't built on inheritance, it was built on truth. Still, questions lingered. After one recording, I opened an email from a listener. Her words were simple but piercing. "Claire, do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I sat staring at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked, waiting for my reply. Forgiveness. What did that even mean when the people who wronged me never admitted they had done anything at all? My fingers hovered above the keys, but no words came. In the end, I closed the laptop without answering. Silence was the only reply I could give. I learned in time that forgiveness wasn't always necessary. Sometimes survival was enough. Months passed, and I felt a pull to create something tangible, something separate from the digital world. I saved carefully, and when the moment came, I bought a small house near the coast. It wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, a porch facing the sea, the kind of place where paint peeled slightly in the salt air. But it was mine. No inheritance, no family name attached, just mine. I filled it with the people who chose me, friends who had stayed when my family turned away, fellow survivors who had become more like siblings than blood ever was. We cooked meals together, told stories late into the night, laughed until our sides ached. It wasn't a mansion, but it was home. It was the family I built, not the one I was born into. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I sat at the porch with a journal on my lap. The waves crashed gently below, their rhythm steady and eternal. I opened to a fresh page, the smell of salt and ink mingling in the air. My hand hovered, then moved with certainty as I wrote, "The best revenge is never revenge. It's freedom." I closed the book softly, a strange calm settling over me. For years, I had believed justice would come only if they suffered, if the world saw them fall. And yes, they had fallen. But the deeper justice was here, in this quiet, in this choice, in this life that was wholly, unapologetically mine. Somewhere, my family still carried the weight of their choices. My father still clung to his pride, my mother to her silence, Daniel to his ruin. But I no longer needed to carry them with me. Their story ended where mine began again. As the last light disappeared, I leaned back and let the sound of the ocean fill the spaces they once occupied. Pain had shaped me, but it didn't define me. Betrayal had scarred me, but it didn't own me. I thought of my mother's letter, tucked safely in a drawer inside, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow when I remembered her words. Fairness was the foundation of love, she had written. She had been right, but fairness had never lived in that house. It lived here, in this freedom, in the family I chose, in the voice I found when they tried to silence me. The night deepened. I gathered my journal, whispered goodnight to the waves, and stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click, not a barrier, but a promise. Tomorrow, I would wake in a place that was mine, surrounded by people who saw me. Tomorrow, I would keep speaking for those still searching for their voices, and for the first time I knew with absolute certainty, I was free.